think about that kind of, the general populace doesn't think about extreme metal when they think about heavy metal either. They're not really thinking about that. But so there's more of an acceptance too. So that's been a change as well.
Yeah, and you got to figure too, a lot of the people that were the quote rebels that were into punk and metal in the late 70s, early 80s, you know, are in their 50s now.
Yeah.
50s and 60s. So, you know, the world has changed. Not just music. The whole world has changed and everything in it, pretty much.
Yeah, it seems like the record labels, they just kind of put your albums out now, and they don't really back you guys like they used to do. And
well, record labels are broke.
Record labels never really back people.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to be honest about it, the only bands that genuinely got backed, a record label in the 80s and early 90s released about 2,000 albums a year. That's 2,000 albums in a year. And how many of those bands did you actually hear about? You heard about a handful, maybe 10. And that's because there was something about those bands that they thought the larger population would buy. So they paid to back those, and they didn't pay to back the other ones. And some of those other ones broke out and became huge anyway. But to be perfectly honest, most bands never really got any backing. And on top of that, the labels also figured out how to claim recoupables.
Yeah, so, that's what I was just going to say. A lot of these things were just, average fans. They think, oh, this record label was, bought them the ability to make this video or do this or do that. It wasn't that they were giving them that money. They were giving them a loan, basically.
Yeah, you had to pay that back, and you still do. And I'm actually far more happy with how the smaller labels work today. I mean, the larger the label you get, like CBS and Warner and all those guys, still operate on the same concept as they always have. But the new labels that cater to metal and things like that, I won't get into details, but we didn't get a loan from Pure Steel Records at all. Pure Steel Records put out our album.
They paid to have it pressed.
They paid to have it pressed. All the expenses for that came out of their pocket. There's nothing that they're charging back to us. And then they did what they could as far as promotion and pushing our album. We were a priority for them for a few months. So, I prefer that much more than the idea of walking into a place and knowing that, hey, the label is giving us $25,000 to do the recording and tour, and we need to make enough money back in order to pay that back.
Yeah, I know of this band back in the 80s. They were a glam metal band, and they got signed to a subsidiary of Atlantic, and they were under this impression, it almost seemed like that they were getting this stuff for free, and they went and they had the studio catered, and they took their time and all this crap, and they wound up with a bill, a whopping bill over $50,000. Well, their album only sold 30,000 units, which at that time, it was not that much for a major label, and the label dropped them. Boom, the band owed the label $50,000.
Yeah, and that's before that money has to be paid back before any royalties. And Steve Vai got a huge deal on Flexible. He got a label to distribute his album, and he paid for everything, which means that he got $7 on the album, which was an unheard of amount for any record label, any record to get per sale. You get on a major label, you get pennies per album. And if you owe money, then the recoupables, which are quote-unquote recoupables, those get paid back out of all your sales, and you don't get a royalty check until that's paid back.
And you got to remember that back in the 80s, a lot of these, if you didn't sell 100,000 units, you were about done. Now, if you're selling 20, 30,000 units, you're doing good.
Yep.
Because record sales have just gone down so much since the internet, downloading all that shit. You know, the people aren't going out and buying physical CDs like they did albums back in the day.
Yeah, I've always had a rule that if I really was into a band, I still buy their CD. I don't do a download because I know that pennies on the dollar for every little snippet of a song. You know, nobody's really making any money that way, so I always make sure I buy a CD of somebody I really care about. You know.
Yeah, and if more people did that, you know, the whole business would be in so much better shape.
True.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, I will speak for all the bands. We appreciate when you do that, especially if you buy directly from the band these days. You know, there's guys out there that say they won't. They have rationalized not buying an album because they think that the record label gets the money and the artist doesn't receive anything out of it. But you know, those guys, if they really thought that, they could buy the album directly from the artist.
Yep.
Yeah, there are very few artists out there who don't have some of their own product, and those who don't are so big that they're not going to respond anyway.
Yeah.
But,
you write Metallica and ask them to buy Kill 'Em All, I don't think you're going to receive a reply.
No, but the majority of bands out there, because like I said earlier, a record label back in the 80s or 90s released approximately 2,000 albums a year. How many of those bands or artists or comedians were actually still out there touting their own album? Because, you know, out of the 10 folks that label pushed hard all year, REO Speedwagon or Boston or whomever, how many other bands were still, putting their own album out and on their tables and on their, well, not the websites at the time, but on their merch tables or through mail order. They were doing it themselves. So there's always a way to get that album without actually, buying it from the label if that's what you object to. But,
yeah, I actually heard of labels back then that actually would sign a band as a tax write-off. That it would be a business expense, and they wouldn't put anything into them.
Yep.
Yeah, the 10, it came out as a tax write-off, but out of those 10 bands that they pushed all year, so that leaves them with 1,990 albums out there that they didn't push. Those 10 make up the shortfall on the others. Yeah, that's the business model for those large labels.
A lot of people don't realize that. They think if you sign with a large label that they're going to give you all kinds of perks and different things, and that you've got it made. And they don't really know what really goes on.
There's a handful of books out there if you're really interested in it that are fantastic reads that get into that. But we've probably driven that into the ground at this point.
Yeah. You got it there, bro.
I also noticed you guys have been featured in a few independent movies as far as the music goes.
Yeah, a couple. One of them, the most recent one, was very small indie thing that I don't know if it was ever even put out on DVD. I know that it was taken to film festivals and things like that. But the first one that we did was a movie called, it was actually direct-to-video that you could get at, video stores and things like that, which was pretty kick-ass to see your name in the credits at the end of a movie.
That's cool. So you guys are close to heading back into the studio soon. What can we expect from your next album?
This one's a bit more. This one's a bit more eclectic than the last one. The last one was pretty universal sound throughout the songs. There were some differences, of course. I mean, you can't have everything sound exactly the same, but
same style, same feel.
Same style, same feel for the most part on the last album. This one is a little more eclectic. There's a couple very traditional metal tunes. There's some real thrashy stuff. There's some very technical stuff too. It's a little bit of everything, and so it's kind of hard to like really nail down. But there's something for everybody on this one, I think.
Well, this see the Overture to Madness. I wrote all the music for it. Period. By myself. I even wrote a lot of the drum parts. Things that I created, a lot of the drum parts, and the album, other than vocals and lyrics and that, which was all Jeff. Other than that, the album was just me. I mean, I really got very, very few suggestions about, hey, why don't you try this here? Maybe 2 or 3 on the whole album. The whole rest of the album was just me in my studio creating stuff. And I rearranged a few things for Jeff's vocals and that type of thing. But that was really it. Now, this new album, we're doing it totally as a group effort. Everybody's involved in all areas of the writing. So you're going to see, subtle differences because of that. But don't think that we've strayed from the same thing that we did on Overture to Madness, because we're still the same style band. But it's got more variety. It might be a little bit more interesting as a whole because of that.
Yeah, it's not like we changed our sound or altered our outlook on music. It's more of an amorphous concept than that. It's still Axmaster, but there's play. There's a little play in it. Some of the stuff. I mean, on Overture to Madness, lyrically and soundly, and how it sounded, everything was very heavy and dark, and oh my God! And while the new one. Yeah, while the new one is still dark, there's a little bit of fun in there.
Well, it's in that one tune. It's really in that one tune. But you're getting a lot more variety of influences, when you're talking about, Denny added some ideas, you added ideas, Jim added ideas. So, you're getting more different perspective of things than just me.
Right. There's even one song on here that 90% of it I put together, and then we fleshed it out in rehearsals, and I'm very proud of that one. There's a lot on this album from everybody's input.
Be honest, once this album comes out, I think I'm going to be the most proud of the writing of this album than of anything I've ever been a part of. Because I with the help of everybody else, what we usually do, I usually come up with the majority of the riffs, and then we take it from there. And I mean, if I do say so myself, I think that I've been able to come up with probably the best stuff I ever did in my life.
Yeah, when everything clicks, everything kind of flows, and then it makes the music better that way. When I used to play, we used to just do jam sessions, and then songs kind of created out of those jam sessions every time. So I can understand where you guys are coming from for as far as influence.
Yeah, usually what happens is I come up either with a riff or like a sample song with just a demo arrangement, bring it to everybody. If everybody digs it, we start working on it, and we change what people think need to be changed, and we keep what they like, But